Barron Trump and the Community Garden, A Story of Unity. The late afternoon sun cast golden rays over the sprawling lawns of West Palm High, a sprawling public school nestled in a quiet corner of Florida. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and blooming jasmine, carried on a gentle breeze that rustled the palm trees lining the campus. Barron, a lanky 16-year-old with a mop of dark blonde hair and a reserved demeanor, sat on a bench outside the school's main building, his backpack slung over one shoulder. His blue eyes scanned the pages of a worn paperback novel, but his mind wasn't on the words. Instead, he was thinking about the community garden across the street, a patch of green he'd passed every day for years but had never truly noticed until recently. The garden wasn't much to look at from the outside. A chain-link fence surrounded a half-acre of raised beds, trellises, and a small greenhouse, all tucked between a strip mall and a busy road. But to the people who tended it, it was a sanctuary. For weeks, Barron had overheard whispers among teachers and students about the garden's fate. A developer had purchased the land, and the garden was slated for demolition to make way for a parking lot. The news had stirred something in Barron, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way the gardeners, old folks, young families, and kids from the neighborhood, worked side by side, laughing and sharing stories. Maybe it was the idea that something so alive could be erased for something as lifeless as asphalt. Whatever it was, Barron couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do something, that he wasn't the type to draw attention to himself. At school, he kept his head down, spoke little, and preferred the company of books to the clamor of the cafeteria. His classmates didn't know much about him, and he liked it that way. But the garden was different. It felt like a cause worth stepping out of his comfort zone for. "Barron, you coming to practice?" a voice called, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Miguel, a wiry sophomore who played center on the school's soccer team, where Barron was a goalie. Miguel's dark hair was damp with sweat from an earlier gym class, and he grinned as he jogged over. "Nah, I'm sitting this one out," Barron said, closing his book. "Got something else on my mind." Miguel raised an eyebrow. "What, you planning to save the world or something?" Barron gave a small smile. "Maybe just a garden." Miguel laughed, assuming it was a joke, and jogged off toward the field. But Barron wasn't joking. He stood, slung his backpack over both shoulders, and crossed the street to the garden. The gate creaked as he pushed it open, and the scent of rich soil and blooming herbs greeted him. A few gardeners were at work. An elderly woman with a sun hat was weeding a bed of tomatoes, and a young girl was watering a row of sunflowers taller than she was. They glanced up, curious but not unfriendly. "Hi," Barron said, his voice quieter than he intended. "I'm Barron. I go to school across the street. I heard about what's happening with the garden." The woman in the sun hat stood, brushing dirt from her gloves. "I'm Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice warm but tired. "And this is Lila." She gestured to the girl, who waved shyly. "You're here about the demolition notice?" Barron nodded. "Is there anything being done to stop it?" Mrs. Carter sighed. "We've tried. Petitions, letters to the city council. But the developers got deep pockets, and the city says a parking lot will serve the community better. Can you believe that?" She shook her head. "We've got until the end of the month before they start bulldozing." Barron's stomach twisted. 3 weeks. That wasn't much time. "What if we could raise money to buy the land back?" he asked. Mrs. Carter's eyes softened. "That's a sweet thought, dear, but we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. More than a bake sale could cover." Barron didn't have an answer for that, but he wasn't ready to give up. "Can I help out here? Maybe learn more about what you do?" Lila piped up, her voice bright. "You can help me water. These sunflowers are thirsty." Barron smiled and took the watering can from her. As he poured water over the roots, he listened to Mrs. Carter talk about the garden's history, how it had been started by a group of neighbors 20 years ago, how it fed dozens of families with fresh vegetables, and how it brought people together. The more he heard, the more determined he became. This place wasn't just dirt and plants, it was a piece of the community's heart. The next day at school, Barron couldn't focus. His history teacher droned on about the Industrial Revolution, but Barron's notebook was filled with sketches of the garden and half-formed ideas. Fundraisers. Awareness campaigns. Maybe a concert or a car wash. He wasn't sure where to start, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. The problem was, he wasn't exactly the most connected kid at West Palm High. He had a few acquaintances from the soccer team, but no close friends. Asking for help meant stepping into uncharted territory. At lunch, he scanned the cafeteria, looking for a starting point. His eyes landed on Aisha, a junior who was president of the environmental club. She was sitting with a group of students, her hijab a bright teal that matched her notebook, where she was scribbling furiously. Aisha was known for her passion for sustainability and her ability to organize events like nobody's business. If anyone could help, it was her. Barron took a deep breath, grabbed his tray, and walked over. "Hey, Aisha," he said, his voice barely audible over the cafeteria noise. "Can I talk to you for a sec?" Aisha looked up, surprised. "Barron, right? From soccer?" "Yeah." He shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to ask you about the community garden. You know, the one across the street. It's going to be torn down." Aisha's expression darkened. "I heard. It's awful. That garden's been there forever. I want to try to save it," Barron said. "Maybe raise money or get the school involved. But I don't know where to start." Aisha leaned forward, her eyes narrowing with interest. "You're serious about this?" Barron nodded. "Yeah. I think it's worth fighting for." She studied him for a moment, then grinned. "Okay, I'm in. But we're going to need more than just us. Let's talk after school. Environmental Club meets in room 204. Bring ideas." Barron felt a spark of hope. "Thanks, Aisha. I'll be there." The Environmental Club meeting was a whirlwind. The room was packed with students, some passionate about climate change, others just there for extra credit. Aisha ran the meeting with the precision of a general, assigning tasks for an upcoming recycling drive. When it was time for new business, she gestured to Barron. "This is Barron," she said. "He's got a project he wants to pitch." Barron stood, his palms sweaty. Public speaking wasn't his thing, but he thought of the garden, Lila's sunflowers, Mrs. Carter's tomatoes, and pushed through. "The community garden across the street is going to be demolished for a parking lot," he said. "I want to save it. It's a place where people grow food, connect, and learn. I think we can raise money to help buy the land or at least get the city to listen. But I need help." The room was quiet for a moment, then a hand shot up. It was Diego, a senior with a knack for art and a reputation for being a bit of a rebel. "What kind of money are we talking about?" he asked. "A lot," Barron admitted. "Hundreds of thousands. But even if we can't buy the land, we can show the city how much the garden means to people. Maybe they'll reconsider." Another student, Priya, chimed in. "We could do a fundraiser. Like a festival or something. My cousin's in a band, they could play for free. I can make posters," Diego offered. "Get the word out." Aisha nodded, already taking notes. "We could set up a crowdfunding page, too. And maybe get local businesses to sponsor." "Barron, you good with leading this?" Barron blinked. "Me? You started it," Aisha said with a grin. "You've got the vision. We'll back you up." He hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. Let's do this." Over the next week, Barron found himself at the center of a growing movement. The Environmental Club became the core of the Save the Garden campaign, but word spread quickly. Students from the art club, the music club, and even the chess team got involved. Barron, who had always preferred the sidelines, was suddenly coordinating meetings, assigning tasks, and checking in with volunteers. It was overwhelming, but he found he didn't mind. The garden gave him a purpose he hadn't realized he'd been missing. The first fundraiser was a car wash held in the school parking lot. Barron, Aisha, Diego, and Priya scrubbed cars alongside a dozen other volunteers, their laughter echoing as they sprayed each other with hoses. By the end of the day, they'd raised $1,200, not enough to buy the land, but enough to prove they were serious. Local businesses started to take notice, and a nearby cafe donated pastries for a bake sale the following weekend. Barron also spent more time at the garden, helping Mrs. Carter and Lila with chores. He learned how to prune tomato plants, trellis beans, and compost kitchen scraps. Lila, who was only 8, followed him around like a shadow, peppering him with questions. "Why do you care so much about the garden?" she asked one day, her hands covered in dirt. Barron thought for a moment. "It's like a place where everyone belongs. Doesn't matter who you are. You can just show up and grow something." Lila grinned. "You're weird, Barron. But nice." He laughed, ruffling her hair. "Thanks, kid." As the deadline loomed, the campaign gained momentum. Diego's posters, vibrant with images of sunflowers and smiling gardeners, popped up all over town. Priya's cousin's band agreed to headline a garden fest at the school, complete with food trucks, face painting, and a plant sale with seedlings from the garden. Aisha set up a crowdfunding page that started to gain traction online, especially after a local news station ran a story about the students' efforts, but not everyone was on board. Some students thought the cause was hopeless. "Why bother?" one kid muttered during a planning meeting. "They're just going to bulldoze it anyway." Barron felt a pang of doubt, but he pushed it aside. "Maybe," he said. "But if we don't try, we'll never know what could have happened." Aisha backed him up. "He's right. Even if we don't save the garden, we're showing people what matters. That's worth something." The naysayers shrugged but stayed to help fold flyers. Barron noticed that even the skeptics were starting to come around, drawn in by the group's energy and determination. The night of Garden Fest was electric. The school's courtyard was transformed into a vibrant fairground, with string lights crisscrossing overhead and tables piled with zucchini bread, basil plants, and handmade crafts. Priya's cousin's band played a mix of indie rock and Latin pop, drawing a crowd of students, families, and neighbors. Barron moved through the event, checking on volunteers and helping Mrs. Carter sell jars of her homemade tomato sauce. As the band launched into a lively cover, Barron spotted a group of younger kids from the garden, including Lila, dancing near the stage. He smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't expected. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. Aisha found him near the plant sale, her face glowing with excitement. "We've raised over $5,000 tonight," she said. "And the crowdfunding page is at $10,000. It's not enough to buy the land, but it's enough to get the city's attention." Barron nodded, his mind racing. "We need to make a case to the city council. Show them what this garden means." "Already on it," Aisha said. "I got us a spot at their next meeting." "You're giving the speech." Barron's eyes widened. "Me? You're the one who started this," she said, echoing her words from weeks ago. "You've got this." The city council meeting was held in a sterile conference room that smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. Barron sat in the front row with Aisha, Diego, Priya, Mrs. Carter, and Lila, clutching a note card with bullet points he'd scribbled the night before. His stomach churned as he watched the council members shuffle papers and sip water, their faces unreadable. When it was his turn to speak, Barron stood, his legs shaky. "Good evening," he said, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat and started again. "My name is Barron, and I'm a student at West Palm High. I'm here to talk about the community garden on 12th Street. It's more than just a piece of land. It's a place where people come together, kids, grandparents, neighbors. They grow food, share stories, and build something real. We've raised over $15,000 to save it, but we need your help. We're asking you to reconsider the demolition and work with us to find a way to keep the garden alive. He went on, talking about the fundraisers, the gardeners, and the sense of community the garden fostered. He mentioned Lila's sunflowers and Mrs. Carter's tomatoes, the way the garden had brought his school together. His voice grew steadier as he spoke, fueled by the faces in the crowd, his classmates, the gardeners, and even a few teachers who had shown up to support him. When he finished, the room was quiet for a moment before Mrs. Carter started clapping. The sound spread, and soon the whole room was applauding. Barron sat down, his face warm, and Aisha squeezed his shoulder. "You nailed it," she whispered. The council didn't make a decision that night, but they agreed to review the garden's case. It wasn't a victory, but it was a start that in the days that followed, the campaign kept growing. The news story about Garden Fest went viral, and donations poured into the crowdfunding page. A local philanthropist reached out, offering to match funds if the city agreed to preserve the garden. Barron and his team worked tirelessly, meeting with city officials and rallying more support. On the last day before the demolition was set to begin, Barron stood in the garden with Aisha, Diego, Priya, Lila, and Mrs. Carter. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They were quiet, waiting for news from the city council's final vote. Lila tugged at Barron's sleeve. "Do you think we did enough?" Barron looked at her, then at the garden, the neat rows of vegetables, the sunflowers swaying in the breeze. "I think we did everything we could," he said. "And that's what matters." His phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. It was a text from Aisha's mom, who had been at the council meeting. They voted to save the garden. "It's staying," the group erupted in cheers, hugging and high-fiving. Lila threw her arms around Barron's waist, and Mrs. Carter wiped tears from her eyes. "You kids," she said, her voice thick. "You did this." Barron smiled, feeling a quiet pride. He hadn't done it alone, he'd had help from friends he hadn't even known he could have. The garden was safe, and so was the sense of community it had created. In the weeks that followed, the garden thrived. New volunteers joined, and the school adopted a plot to grow vegetables for the cafeteria. Barron became a regular, helping with chores and teaching younger kids how to plant seeds. He was still quiet, still preferred books to crowds, but he'd found his place. The garden had taught him that even a single voice, when joined with others, could make a difference. As he stood in the garden one evening, watching the sunset with Aisha, Diego, and Priya, he realized something else. Leadership wasn't about being the loudest or the most confident. It was about caring enough to try, and kind enough to bring others along. The garden was proof of that, a patchwork of dirt and dreams, held together by the hands of a community united.